The wind that cut through Paradise, Nevada on that December morning in 1881 had teeth sharp enough to make even hardened miners cry for mercy. And Ophelia Bradford thought she might actually die right there on that train depot platform before anyone even noticed she existed. She had been standing there for 3 hours, her threadbare shawl doing nothing against the unseasonable cold snap that had gripped the high desert. Her lips blue, and her fingers gone numb inside her worn gloves. The telegram she clutched promised her a position as a schoolteacher, but the man who was supposed to meet her never came. And now the sun was setting and she had nowhere to go, and exactly 43 cents to her name. Warren Xavier had been riding past the depot on his way back to his ranch when he saw her. A slight figure in a faded green dress, trembling so violently he could see it from 50 feet away. He had been planning to ride straight through town, wanted nothing more than to get home and check on the new foals, but something about the way she stood there, alone and clearly terrified, made him pull his horse to a stop. He dismounted with the easy grace of a man who had spent more of his life in the saddle than out of it, his boots hitting the wooden platform with a solid thud that made her jump. "Madam," he said, and his voice was rough from a day of not talking to anyone but his horse. "You are going to freeze to death out here." She looked at him with eyes the color of honey, wide and wary. "I am waiting for someone." "How long have you been waiting?" "Since the train arrived at 2 o'clock. Warren glanced at the sky, where the last rays of sun were painting the desert mountains purple and gold. "It is past 5 now. Whoever was supposed to meet you is not coming." Her face crumpled for just a moment before she forced it back into composure, and Warren felt something twist in his chest. She could not have been more than 22 or 23, and she looked like she had been through hell to get here. Her dress was clean but mended in a dozen places, her boots were scuffed nearly through at the toes, and the carpet bag at her feet had seen better days. "I have a position," she said, her voice shaking with cold and something else, maybe desperation. "As a schoolteacher. Mr. Henderson was supposed to meet me." "Henderson?" Warren frowned. "George Henderson." "Yes, do you know him? Died 4 days ago. Heart gave out while he was fixing his fence." The color drained from her already pale face. "Oh no, oh no, no, no." She swayed on her feet and Warren moved quickly, catching her elbow. Through the thin fabric of her dress he could feel how cold she was, how she was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. "When did you last eat?" he asked. "Yesterday morning, before I got on the train in Salt Lake City." Warren made a decision. "You are coming with me." "I cannot." She tried to pull away, but she had no strength. "I do not even know you." "My name is Warren Xavier. I own a cattle ranch about 8 miles from here. I have a housekeeper who is old enough to be my grandmother and mean enough to keep me honest. You can stay in the guest room until we figure out what to do about Henderson being dead and you being stranded." He picked up her carpet bag with his free hand. "You are coming home where you belong." "Where I belong?" She looked at him like he had lost his mind. "You do not know anything about me. I know you are about to collapse from cold and hunger, and I know I am not the kind of man who leaves a woman to freeze on a train platform." He guided her toward his horse, a big bay gelding who stood patiently. "Can you ride?" "I have never been on a horse in my life." Of course she had not. Warren sighed and swung himself up into the saddle, then reached down for her. "Put your foot in the stirrup and give me your hand." She hesitated, looking up at him with those honey-colored eyes. "Why are you doing this?" "Because it is the right thing to do. Now come on before we both freeze." She took his hand. Her fingers were ice cold even through his glove, and when she tried to step up her boots slipped off the stirrup. Warren leaned down, got his arm around her waist, and hauled her up in front of him in one smooth motion. She gasped and grabbed onto his arm, and he could feel her trembling against his chest. "Hold on," he said, and nudged the bay into a walk. They rode through paradise as the sun finished setting, past the saloons and the general store and the church with its white steeple. People stared as they passed, and Warren knew the gossip would be all over town by morning, but he did not care. The woman in his arms was shaking so hard he was worried she might actually be dangerously cold. "What is your name?" he asked as they left the town behind, Ophelia Bradford. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I came from Boston. That is a long way. I did not have anything left there. My father died last year and left debts. They took the house, everything. A friend saw the advertisement for a teacher in Paradise, and I spent my last money on the train ticket." She laughed, a broken sound. "I suppose I should have written to confirm before I traveled 2,000 miles. Henderson would not have gotten the letter anyway. He died pretty quick." Warren urged the horse into a trot, wanting to get her somewhere warm as fast as possible. "Do you have any other family?" "No one. It was just my father and me after my mother died when I was 10. They rode in silence for a while, following the trail that led out into the open desert. The cold was brutal, the kind that made your lungs hurt when you breathed, and Warren pulled his coat open so he could wrap it around her as well. She stiffened at first, then relaxed against him, seeking warmth. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You did not have to do this." "Yes, I did." The ranch came into view as the last light faded from the sky, a sprawling collection of buildings silhouetted against the darkening desert. The main house was built of adobe and wood, with a wide porch and windows that glowed with lamplight. Warren could see smoke rising from the chimney and felt relief. Martha would have dinner ready and a fire going. He dismounted in front of the house and reached up to help Ophelia down. Her legs buckled when her feet hit the ground, and he caught her, lifting her into his arms. She did not protest, which told him exactly how bad off she was. The front door opened before he reached it, and Martha stood there, all 4 feet 11 inches of her, wiping her hands on her apron. She took one look at Ophelia, and her weathered face creased with concern. "Good Lord, Warren, what have you brought home?" "Found her freezing at the depot. She needs hot food and a warm bed." Martha stepped aside to let them in. "Bring her to the kitchen, I have stew on." The warmth of the house hit them like a wall, and Ophelia made a small sound of relief. Warren carried her through to the kitchen and set her carefully in a chair by the stove. Martha was already ladling stew into a bowl, moving with the efficient speed of someone who had been taking care of people for 60 years. "What is your name, child?" Martha asked, setting the bowl in front of Ophelia. "Ophelia Bradford, madam." "Well, Miss Bradford, you eat that while I get a room ready for you. Warren, help her out of those wet boots." Warren knelt and carefully unlaced Ophelia's boots, easing them off her feet. Her stockings were damp, and he could see her toes were an alarming shade of white. "Martha, bring some warm water. Not hot, warm." "I know how to treat frostbite, boy," Martha called from the other room. Ophelia was eating the stew like she had never tasted anything so good in her life, barely stopping to breathe between bites. Warren sat back on his heels and watched her, feeling that strange twist in his chest again. She was pretty in a delicate way that seemed completely unsuited to the harsh desert, with dark hair that had come loose from its pins and freckles across her nose. But there was something in the set of her jaw, the way she held herself even while falling apart, that suggested she was stronger than she looked. "Slow down," he said gently. "You are going to make yourself sick." She paused, spoon halfway to her mouth, and looked at him. Really looked at him for the first time. He watched her take in his face, the scar above his left eyebrow, the 2 days of stubble on his jaw, the way his dark hair curled over his collar because he kept forgetting to get it cut. Whatever she saw made her relax a fraction. "I am sorry," she said. "I have not been very gracious about this. You have been cold and hungry and scared. You do not need to be gracious." Martha bustled back in with a basin of water and a pile of towels. "Put her feet in here, gently now." She looked at Ophelia. "This is going to hurt when the feeling comes back." "I understand," Ophelia said, but when Warren lifted her feet into the water she gasped and tears sprang to her eyes. "I know," Warren said quietly, holding her feet steady. "Just breathe through it." For the next 20 minutes he sat there on the kitchen floor, keeping her feet in the water while Martha fussed around them and Ophelia bit her lip to keep from crying out. By the time the color started coming back to her toes, tears were running silently down her face. "All right," Martha said finally. "Let me get you into a proper bed, Miss Bradford. Warren, you bring her bag up to the blue room." Warren lifted Ophelia again and followed Martha up the stairs. The blue room was at the end of the hall, a comfortable space with a big bed and a window that looked out over the desert. Martha had already turned down the covers and lit a lamp on the bedside table. "There is a nightgown in the dresser," Martha said. "I will come back with more blankets." "You sleep as long as you need to, child." Warren set Ophelia on the bed and stepped back. She looked up at him, those honey eyes full of emotion. "I do not know how to thank you." "You do not need to thank me. Just rest." He paused in the doorway. "We will figure out everything else in the morning." He closed the door and leaned against the wall outside, suddenly exhausted. Martha appeared at his elbow, giving him a long look. "What were you thinking, bringing a strange woman home?" "I was thinking she would die if I left her there." "And what are you going to do with her now?" "Henderson is dead, so there is no teaching position. She said she has no family and no money, did she not?" I heard her. Martha's expression softened. "You have a good heart, Warren Xavier, too good sometimes, but you cannot save everyone." "I am not trying to save everyone, just her." He walked away before Martha could say anything else, heading to his own room at the other end of the hall. Through his window he could see the stars scattered across the huge desert sky, cold and beautiful and indifferent. Somewhere out there were his cattle, his horses, the land that had been in his family for 2 generations. He had built a good life here after the war, after everything he had seen and done. A quiet life, a simple life. And now, there was a woman with honey-colored eyes sleeping in his guest room, and Warren had the unsettling feeling that his simple life was about to get a lot more complicated. He did not sleep well that night. He kept thinking about how small she had felt in his arms, how she had tried so hard not to cry even when the pain of warming up must have been terrible. He thought about her saying she had come all the way from Boston with nothing but hope and 43 cents, and how that hope had died along with George Henderson. When the sun came up, he was already dressed and heading downstairs. Martha was in the kitchen, as always, making coffee and frying bacon. She gave him a knowing look but did not say anything, just poured him a cup and went back to her cooking. Ophelia appeared in the doorway an hour later, looking rested but uncertain. She had put her dress back on, but Martha had apparently given her a shawl, because she was wrapped in one of the thick wool ones that Martha kept for winter. Her hair was braided and pinned up, and there was color in her cheeks again. "Good morning," Warren said, standing up from the table. "How are you feeling?" "Much better, thank you." She twisted her hands together. "I want to apologize for yesterday. I must have seemed so weak and foolish. You seemed like someone who had reached the end of their rope. There is no shame in that." He pulled out a chair. "Sit down and have some breakfast." Martha set a plate in front of her piled with bacon and eggs and biscuits. Ophelia stared at it like it was a feast. "I cannot possibly eat all this." "Yes, you can," Martha said firmly. "You are skin and bones, child. Eat." They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Warren watched Ophelia covertly, noticing the way she savored each bite, the way she sat up straight despite everything. She had been raised as a lady, he thought. Educated, not the kind of woman who was meant for the rough life of the frontier. "We need to talk about what happens next," Warren said finally. Ophelia set down her fork. "I know. I have been thinking about it all morning. I suppose I should go back to town and see if there are any other positions available. Perhaps the hotel needs help or the general store. Paradise is not a big town. There might not be anything. Then I will have to try somewhere else, maybe Carson City or Reno. With 43 cents, she flinched. I will find a way." Warren leaned back in his chair, studying her. An idea had been forming in his mind since last night, something that probably made no sense but felt right anyway. "I have another option." "What is that?" "Stay here, work for me." Ophelia blinked. "Doing what?" "I need help with the bookkeeping and the correspondence. The ranch is doing well, but the paperwork is getting out of hand and I hate it. You are educated. You can read and write and do figures. You could also help Martha with the cooking and the house if you wanted." He saw her starting to shake her head and kept talking. "I would pay you fair wages and you would have your own room and all your meals. It would give you time to figure out what you really want to do. Mr. Xavier, I cannot impose on you like that. It is not imposing if you are working for it. And call me Warren. Mr. Xavier makes me feel like my father." She looked at Martha, who was watching the whole exchange with interest. "What do you think, Mrs. Martha?" "I think it would be nice to have another woman around here," Martha said. "And Lord knows Warren needs help with those account books. The man can track 100 head of cattle in a dust storm, but he cannot add a column of numbers to save his life." "That is not true," Warren protested. "I can add just fine. I just find it boring." Ophelia bit her lip, thinking. Warren could see her pride warring with her practicality, and he understood it. She did not want to be a charity case, but she also did not have many options. "If I agree," she said slowly, "it would only be temporary, until I can save enough money to move on or find another teaching position." "That is fine. And I would insist on earning my keep, no special treatment just because I am a woman. Fair enough." She took a deep breath. "Then I accept. Thank you, Warren." The sound of his name in her voice did something strange to his pulse, but he ignored it. This was a business arrangement, nothing more. He needed help, and she needed a job. The fact that he had been unable to stop thinking about her since yesterday meant nothing. "Good," he said, standing up. "Let me show you the office and you can see what you are getting into." The office was a small room off the main parlor, with a desk piled high with papers and ledgers that had not been updated in weeks. Ophelia looked at the mess, and then at Warren. "When was the last time you did any of this?" "I might have let it go for a while." "A while?" "Warren, some of these invoices are from August. I told you I hate paperwork." She shook her head, but she was almost smiling, and Warren felt absurdly pleased that he had put that expression on her face. "Well, let me get started then. Where do you keep the account ledgers?" They spent the rest of the morning sorting through the chaos, with Ophelia asking questions and Warren trying to explain his barely existent system. She was quick and organized, making neat stacks of papers and writing notes to herself about what needed to be done. Warren found himself making excuses to stay in the office instead of going out to work with the ranch hands like he should have, just so he could watch her work. "You do not have to hover," she said without looking up from the ledger she was reviewing. "I promise I will not steal the silverware." "We do not have silver, it is all tin." "Then I definitely will not steal it." She glanced at him. "Do you not have work to do outside?" "Yes, but I need to make sure you understand everything." "Warren, I graduated from finishing school with honors in mathematics and accounting." I promise I can handle a ranch ledger. He grinned. You went to finishing school, my father insisted, even though we could barely afford it. He wanted me to be a proper lady. She said it with a mix of fondness and bitterness. A lot of good it did me. I think your father would be proud of you. You traveled across the country alone to make a new life. That takes courage. She looked at him for a long moment, something soft in her expression. That is kind of you to say. I only say what is true. The moment stretched between them, full of something Warren did not have a name for. Then, Ophelia looked back down at the ledger and the moment was gone, but Warren felt the echo of it all the way to his bones. He forced himself to leave the office and go out to check on the horses. His ranch hands, Miguel and James, were both in the barn working on repairing a broken stall door. They looked up when he walked in and Miguel grinned. So it is true. You brought a woman home. She needed help. I helped her. That is all. Sure, boss. Whatever you say. James, who was older and wiser, gave Miguel a look that shut him up. Is she all right? Martha said she was half frozen. She is fine now. She is going to stay and help with the bookkeeping. That is good. You need all the help you can get with that. James hammered in another nail. She planning on staying long term? I do not know. We did not really discuss it. Miguel could not help himself. She is pretty, boss. Real pretty. Miguel. What? I am just saying what everyone is thinking. Warren glared at him. Everyone needs to stop thinking it. She works here. That is all. Now get back to work. He spent the rest of the day deliberately staying away from the house, checking on the cattle in the south pasture and riding the fence line to look for breaks. It was cold but clear, the kind of day where you could see for miles across the desert to the mountains beyond. He loved this land with a fierceness that sometimes surprised him, this harsh and beautiful place that had given him a second chance at life. But when the sun started to set, and he turned his horse back toward home, it was not just the land he was thinking about. It was the woman in his office with honey-colored eyes and a determination that matched his own. Dinner that night was a revelation. Ophelia had insisted on helping Martha cook, and together they had produced a meal better than anything Warren had eaten in months. Roast chicken and potatoes and vegetables and pie for dessert. Martha had not made pie in years. This is incredible, Warren said, reaching for a second helping of everything. Ophelia did most of it, Martha said. Turns out finishing school teaches you how to cook too. Only because my father's housekeeper took pity on me and taught me, Ophelia said. She said a woman should know how to feed herself and others, no matter what her station in life. Smart woman, Warren said. They ate and talked, and Warren found himself relaxing in a way he had not in years. Martha told stories about the early days of the ranch, when Warren's father was still alive, and the territory was even wilder than it was now. Ophelia listened intently, asking questions and laughing in all the right places. She fit into the evening like she had always been there, and Warren tried not to think about what that meant. After dinner, he went out to the porch to smoke his pipe and look at the stars. He heard the door open behind him and knew without looking that it was Ophelia. Mind if I join you? She asked. Not at all. She came to stand beside him at the railing, pulling Martha's shawl tight around her shoulders. It is so different here from Boston. The sky is so much bigger. That is what I love about it. You can see forever. I can understand that. She was quiet for a moment. Thank you again for taking me in. I know you did not have to, and I know it must be strange having a stranger in your house. You are not a stranger anymore. You work here now, still. Most men would not have been so kind. Warren looked at her, at the way the lamplight from inside made her hair glow and cast shadows on her face. My mother always said you could judge a person by how they treated someone who could do nothing for them. You could not do anything for me yesterday. You were just a woman who needed help. That is all that mattered. Your mother sounds like she was a wonderful person. She was. She died when I was 15, fever. I am sorry. I know what it is like to lose a mother too young. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Warren felt peaceful in a way he rarely did, and he knew it was because of the woman beside him. He barely knew her. She had been under his roof for barely 24 hours, but something about her presence felt right, like a piece of a puzzle clicking into place. I should go in, Ophelia said finally. I want to make more progress on the books tomorrow and I need to be up early. Good night, Ophelia. Good night, Warren. She went inside and Warren stayed on the porch until his pipe was finished, thinking about honey-colored eyes and what it meant to feel this way about someone he barely knew. The next few weeks fell into a routine that felt both strange and natural. Ophelia took over the office completely, bringing order to the chaos of Warren's record-keeping and correspondence. She was brilliant at it, able to track expenses and income in her head while simultaneously writing letters to buyers and organizing the supply orders. Within a week, she had everything caught up, and within 2 weeks she was actually ahead. Warren found excuses to come inside throughout the day, telling himself he needed to check on something or review an invoice. Really, he just wanted to see her, to hear her voice, to watch the way she bit her lip when she was concentrating. He was falling for her and he knew it, but he did not know what to do about it. The problem was that Ophelia seemed determined to keep things professional. She was polite and friendly, but she maintained a careful distance, never letting their conversations drift too far into personal territory. Warren respected that, but it drove him crazy. He wanted to know everything about her, wanted to hear about her childhood in Boston and her dreams for the future, and what made her laugh and what made her cry. Christmas came and went. Warren gave Ophelia a new dress from the general store, something warmer than the thin thing she had arrived in. She gave him a book of poetry she had somehow acquired, with an inscription on the inside cover that said, "Thank you for giving me a home when I had nowhere to go." It was not home, not really. Home implied something permanent, and Ophelia had made it clear she was only staying until she had enough money saved. But Warren had started to hope, in the quiet moments late at night, that maybe she would change her mind. January brought cold, clear days and frost that sparkled on the desert sand. Ophelia had been there for 5 weeks when everything changed. Warren was in the barn with Miguel and James, checking on a mare that was due to foal any day, when one of the ranch hands from the neighboring property came riding up at a gallop. His name was Tom, and he looked terrified. "Warren, you need to come quick. There has been an accident at the mine." The silver mine north of Paradise had been there for 10 years, employing half the men in town. Warren felt ice in his stomach. "What kind of accident? Cave-in. They are saying a dozen men are trapped." Warren was on his horse in seconds. "Miguel, James, get the medical supplies and meet me there. Tom, ride back and tell them I am coming." He galloped toward town, his heart pounding. The mine was dangerous work and everyone knew it, but that did not make it any easier when something went wrong. By the time he got there, a crowd had gathered at the entrance, miners and townspeople and wives clutching each other and crying. The mine foreman, a grizzled man named Pete, grabbed Warren's arm. "Thank God you are here. We need every hand we can get to dig them out." "How bad is it?" "Bad. The support timbers gave way in the main shaft. We can hear them knocking, but we do not know how much air they have." Warren rolled up his sleeves. "Let me in." For the next 6 hours he was underground with 24 other men, digging through rock and timber by lamplight. It was hot and dusty and terrifying, with the constant fear that the rest of the shaft would come down on top of them. They pulled out 3 men in the first hour, all alive but injured. Then 4 more. then 2 more who were not breathing and had to be carried out in sheets. Warren was filthy and exhausted and bleeding from a dozen cuts when they finally broke through to the main pocket where the remaining men were trapped. They were alive, all 5 of them, huddled in a space barely big enough to stand up in. The joy and relief was overwhelming. It was past midnight when Warren finally made it back to the ranch. He was so tired he could barely stay in the saddle, and his hands were shaking from exertion and adrenaline crash. He stumbled into the house and found Ophelia waiting up for him in the parlor, still fully dressed. She took one look at him and gasped, "Oh my God, Warren, I am all right. You are bleeding." She was at his side in an instant, guiding him to a chair. "Martha went to bed, but I will get the medical supplies. Do not move." She rushed off and came back with clean cloths and bandages and a basin of warm water. She knelt in front of him and started carefully cleaning the cuts on his hands and arms, her touch gentle but efficient. "I heard about the mine," she said quietly. "They said everyone is alive." "Everyone who made it to the pocket. We lost 2 men." Warren closed his eyes. "They have families, children." "I am so sorry." She finished bandaging his hands and looked up at him. There were tears in her eyes, and Warren realized she had been worried about him, really worried. The careful distance she maintained had cracked. "I thought you might have been hurt," she whispered. "When I heard about the accident, I thought, what if Warren is there? What if something happens to him? And I realized I could not bear it." Warren reached out and cupped her face with his bandaged hand. "Ophelia, I know I should not say this. I know I am just an employee and I have no right to feel this way. But Warren, I care about you so much. I have been trying not to, but I cannot help it." "Why have you been trying not to?" "Because it is foolish. I have nothing to offer you. I came here with nothing and I still have nothing. You deserve someone better than a penniless teacher who could not even make it to her first day of work." Warren leaned forward, ignoring the pain in his body. "You are not nothing. You are brilliant and strong and beautiful, and you have made me feel things I have not felt in years, maybe ever. I have been trying to respect your boundaries, but Ophelia, I am falling in love with you. I think I started falling the moment I saw you trembling on that platform." She stared at him, her eyes wide. "You are, I am. And I know it is fast, and I know you might not feel the same way, but I need you to know. Warren, I feel the same way. I have been falling in love with you too." He kissed her then, leaning down to capture her lips with his. She made a small sound of surprise and then kissed him back, her hands coming up to frame his face. It was gentle and tentative and absolutely perfect, tasting of hope and new beginnings. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Ophelia laughed, a sound full of joy. "I cannot believe this is happening. Believe it." "What do we do now?" Warren smiled, the exhaustion falling away. "Now you stop being my employee and start being the woman I am courting. If you want that, I want that. I want that so much." They sat there in the parlor, holding each other, until Martha came downstairs and found them and shooed them off to bed with a knowing smile. The next few months were the happiest of Warren's life. He courted Ophelia properly, with flowers picked from the desert and rides out to see the sunset and long conversations on the porch under the stars. She was everything he had not known he was looking for, smart and funny and kind, with a strength that matched his own. She continued to help with the ranch bookkeeping, but now it was because she wanted to, not because she was obligated. She made suggestions for improving the operation, and Warren listened, implementing changes that increased their profits and efficiency. She also started teaching some of the ranch hands to read and write in the evenings, something that made Warren love her even more. The town of Paradise accepted her completely. The pastor's wife invited her to join the ladies' social group, and the general store owner asked her advice on his bookkeeping. She was making a life here, putting down roots, and Warren could see it happening with a joy that felt almost too big for his chest. In April, when the desert was covered in wildflowers and the weather was perfect, Warren rode out to the spot where he had first decided he loved this land. It was a rise overlooking the valley, with a view that stretched for miles in every direction. He had brought Ophelia there 3 times already, and each time she said it was the most beautiful place she had ever seen. Today, he brought her here for a different reason. They dismounted and stood together looking out at the view. Ophelia leaned against him and sighed with contentment. "I never get tired of this. Neither do I." Warren turned to face her, taking her hands in his. "Ophelia, I have something to ask you." She looked up at him and her eyes widened. "Warren," he got down on one knee, pulling out the ring he had ridden all the way to Carson City to buy. It was a simple gold band with a single diamond, nothing too fancy but beautiful in its simplicity. "Ophelia Bradford, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. You have made my life better in every way, made my house feel like a home, made me want to be a better man. Will you marry me? Will you stay here in paradise and build a life with me?" Tears were streaming down her face, but she was smiling, a huge, radiant smile that lit up her whole face. "Yes, yes, Warren, I will marry you. I love you so much." He slipped the ring on her finger and stood up, catching her in his arms and spinning her around. She laughed and kissed him, and they stood there on the rise overlooking the valley, holding each other and planning their future. They were married in June in the little church in Paradise, with what seemed like the whole town in attendance. Ophelia wore a dress that Martha had helped her sew, white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Warren wore his best suit, the one he had bought for his father's funeral and barely worn since. Martha cried through the whole ceremony, and Miguel and James stood up as witnesses, both grinning like fools. The wedding supper was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and lanterns hung in the trees. There was music and dancing and more food than they could possibly eat. Warren danced with his new wife under the stars and thought he might actually be the luckiest man alive. "Are you happy?" he asked her as they swayed to the music. "I am happier than I have ever been. This is everything I never knew I wanted. You came to Paradise looking for a teaching job and ended up with me. That seems like a bad trade," she laughed. "It is the best trade I ever made. I love you, Warren Xavier." "I love you too, Ophelia Xavier." The name fit her, he thought. She was not Ophelia Bradford anymore, the penniless woman trembling at the depot. She was Ophelia Xavier, his wife, the woman who belonged here with him. Their first year of marriage was an adventure in learning to live together. Ophelia turned out to have strong opinions about things like curtains and furniture arrangement. And Warren discovered he actually enjoyed having someone to make decisions with. They worked together on the ranch, with Ophelia taking over more of the business side and freeing Warren up to focus on the cattle and horses he loved. They fought sometimes, usually about small things like Warren tracking mud through the house or Ophelia rearranging his tools. But they always made up quickly, neither of them able to stay angry at the other for long. Martha watched them with satisfaction, pleased to see the ranch house full of life and laughter again. She had worried about Warren after the war, worried he would never let himself be happy. But Ophelia had changed that, had brought him back to himself in ways Martha had not thought possible. In the spring of their second year together, Ophelia started feeling ill in the mornings. At first she thought it was something she ate, but when it continued for a week, Martha took one look at her and started laughing. "Child, you are pregnant." Ophelia stared at her. "What? But we have only been married a year." "That is plenty of time." "When did you last have your monthly courses?" Ophelia thought about it and her eyes went wide. 6 weeks ago." "Oh my God, I am pregnant. Warren found out that evening when he came in from working on the south fence. Ophelia met him at the door, practically vibrating with excitement and nervousness. "We need to talk," she said. His face went serious. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. At least I do not think so. Warren, I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." For a moment he just stared at her. Then he let out a whoop and picked her up, spinning her around just like he had the day he proposed. "We are having a baby. You are happy." "Happy, Ophelia, I am thrilled. Terrified, but thrilled." He set her down carefully, suddenly worried. "Are you all right? Do you need to sit down?" "Should you be standing?" She laughed. "I am fine. Women have babies all the time. It is natural. But you are my wife. You are special. You are going to be insufferable for the next 7 months, are you not?" "Absolutely." He was true to his word. Warren fussed over Ophelia constantly, to the point where she had to physically push him out of the house some days so she could get work done. He insisted she stop riding horses and lifting anything heavier than a book. He brought her treats from town and rubbed her feet every night and built a cradle in the barn that was a work of art. Martha watched it all with amusement. "He's going to drive you crazy before this baby comes." "He already is," Ophelia said, but she was smiling. She loved seeing Warren so excited and protective, even when it was excessive. Their son was born on a cold November night, arriving after 20 hours of labor that left Ophelia exhausted and Warren a nervous wreck. Martha delivered him with the help of the doctor from town, and when she placed the squalling baby in Ophelia's arms, Warren thought his heart might actually burst. "He is perfect," Ophelia whispered, tears running down her face. "Look at him, Warren. We made him." Warren sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his son in wonder. He was red-faced and tiny, with a shock of dark hair and lungs that worked just fine if his crying was any indication. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months but never settled on anything. Now, looking at their son, Ophelia smiled. "I want to name him after your father, William." Warren looked at her, overwhelmed with love. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. William Xavier. It is a good, strong name." "William," Warren repeated, testing it out. "Hello, William. I am your father, and I promise I am going to do my best to be worthy of you." The baby stopped crying and seemed to look at him, and Warren felt something fundamental shift in his chest. He was a father now. He had a son. The responsibility was enormous and terrifying and absolutely perfect. They settled into life with a baby, which was both harder and more rewarding than either of them expected. William was a good baby overall, but he had his nights, and Warren and Ophelia took turns walking him around the house at 2 in the morning, exhausted but happy. Martha was in her element, fussing over the baby and giving advice that was usually right even if they did not want to admit it. Miguel and James came by to meet William, and both of them seemed shocked by how small he was. "I cannot believe something that tiny will grow into a person," Miguel said. "That is generally how it works," Warren said dryly. The ranch continued to prosper under their joint management. Ophelia had implemented a new system for tracking the cattle that made it much easier to know exactly what they had and where it was. Warren had expanded the horse breeding operation and was developing a reputation for producing quality animals. They were making good money and building something solid. When William was 6 months old, Ophelia came to Warren with a proposal. "I want to start a school. In Paradise." "Yes. There are enough children now to justify it, and they deserve an education. We have that empty building by the church that no one is using. We could convert it into a classroom." Warren thought about it. "How much would it cost?" "Not much. Some desks and books and supplies." "I already talked to the pastor and he said the church would support it. We would just need to fund the initial setup." "Then let us do it." Ophelia beamed. "Really? Really? You came here to be a teacher, Let us make that happen." By the fall, the Paradise School had opened with Ophelia as its teacher and 12 students ranging from age 5 to 15. She taught them reading and writing and arithmetic and history, and she loved every moment of it. Warren would sometimes ride by during the day and see her standing at the front of the classroom, her face animated as she explained something, and he would fall in love with her all over again. Life was good. Better than good. Warren had everything he had ever wanted, and some things he had not known enough to want. A thriving ranch, a wife he adored, a son who was growing like a weed, and a community he was proud to be part of. When William was 2 years old, Ophelia told Warren she was pregnant again. This time, Warren managed not to completely lose his mind, though he still fussed over her more than she wanted. Their daughter was born in the spring, arriving quickly and easily compared to William's difficult birth. They named her Lucy Martha, after no one in particular, but because Ophelia said it was a happy name and Martha cried when she heard the middle name. Lucy was as different from William as it was possible to be. Where William had been quiet and serious even as a baby, Lucy was loud and joyful from the start. She laughed at everything and charmed everyone who met her. William, now old enough to understand he had a sister, was fascinated by her and appointed himself her protector. Ophelia went back to teaching 3 months after Lucy was born, bringing the baby with her to school in a basket that sat beside her desk. The students loved having a baby in the classroom and took turns helping watch her during recess. It was unconventional, but it worked, and that was what mattered. Years passed in a blur of seasons and growth and change. William started school when he was 5 and proved to be brilliant like his mother, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. Lucy started at 4 and was more interested in playing than learning, but Ophelia was patient with her. The school grew, adding more students and eventually requiring a second teacher. Ophelia hired a young woman named Sarah from Carson City, and they worked together to give Paradise the education it deserved. The ranch continued to expand. Warren bought more land and more cattle, hired more hands, built a bigger barn. He and Ophelia made decisions together, partners in every sense of the word. They had arguments and disagreements, but they always talked through them, always found solutions that worked for both of them. Martha got older and eventually retired from most of her duties, though she still lived at the ranch and loved bossing everyone around. Miguel married a woman from town and had 3 children of his own. James eventually moved on to start his own spread further north, but he visited regularly and always brought presents for William and Lucy. Paradise itself grew. More people moved in, attracted by the mine and the ranching and the promise of a better life. The town got a proper school building, a second church, a doctor's office, and even a small library that Ophelia helped establish. It was becoming a real community, the kind of place where people looked out for each other. When William was 10 and Lucy was 8, Ophelia surprised Warren with the news that she was pregnant again. They were both shocked since they had assumed their family was complete, but once the surprise wore off they were thrilled. 3 children, Warren said, his hand on her belly. "We are really doing this. We really are. Are you happy?" "I am always happy with you." Their 3rd child, a boy they named Thomas, was born when Warren was 38 and Ophelia was 35. He came into the world screaming and did not stop for what felt like months. He was colicky and difficult and kept them up all night, and Warren loved him with a fierceness that surprised him. "I thought I could not love anyone as much as I love William and Lucy," he told Ophelia one night as they took turns walking Thomas around the bedroom. "But I do. I love him just as much." "That is the magic of children," Ophelia said sleepily from the bed. Your heart just keeps expanding. Thomas eventually grew out of his colic and turned into a sweet, curious boy who followed his father everywhere. Where William was academic and Lucy was social, Thomas was physical. He loved being outside, loved working with the animals, loved riding horses and roping cattle. Warren saw himself in his youngest son, and it made him proud. The years continued to roll by. William went away to university in San Francisco, studying law because he wanted to help people and make things better. Lucy got engaged at 18 to a rancher's son from the next county, a good man who clearly adored her. Thomas was talking about taking over the ranch someday, which made Warren both proud and a little melancholy, because it meant he was getting old. Warren and Ophelia celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with a party at the ranch that rivaled their wedding. Half of Paradise turned out to help them celebrate, bringing food and gifts and testimonials about what their marriage meant to the community. Warren danced with his wife under the same stars where they had danced at their wedding, and she was just as beautiful to him now as she had been then. Maybe more, because now he knew every line on her face, every silver thread in her hair, and he loved all of it. 20 years, she said, her head on his shoulder. Can you believe it? Some days it feels like yesterday. Other days it feels like forever in the best possible way. Do you ever regret it? Taking in a strange woman from the depot, Warren pulled back to look at her. Ophelia Xavier, you are the best decision I ever made. You and our children and this life we built together. I have never regretted a single moment. Good. Because I love you more now than I did when we got married, and I loved you so much then I thought my heart would burst. I love you too. Always. They stood there swaying to the music, surrounded by family and friends, and Warren thought about how close he had come to never having this. If he had ridden past the depot that cold December day in 1881, if he had not stopped, if he had not taken her home, but he had. He had seen her trembling in the cold, and he had said the words that changed both their lives. You are coming home where you belong, and she had. She belonged here in Paradise with him, building a life and a family and a legacy. She belonged in his arms and in his heart and in every moment of every day. William graduated from law school and came back to Paradise to practice, becoming the town's first resident lawyer. He married a woman he met in San Francisco, a teacher like his mother, and they settled into a house in town. Lucy's wedding was the social event of the year, with a ceremony at the church and a reception that lasted until dawn. Thomas, at 15, was already talking about improvements he wanted to make to the ranch when he took over, and Warren listened with pride and amusement. Martha passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 82, and the whole town mourned her. They buried her on the ranch she had loved, under a cottonwood tree with a view of the mountains. Ophelia cried for days, and Warren held her, remembering the tough old woman who had helped raise him and welcomed his wife without question. Warren was 45 when he found the lump in his side. He did not tell anyone at first, hoping it would go away, but when it started hurting, he finally went to the doctor. The news was not good. Cancer, the doctor said. Probably a year, maybe 2 if he was lucky. Warren sat in the doctor's office and tried to process it. He was 45 years old. He had a wife he loved and 3 children and a ranch that was thriving. He was not ready to die, but he also knew that sometimes you did not get a choice. He told Ophelia that night in their bedroom with the door closed. She stared at him for a long moment and then collapsed into his arms, sobbing. He held her and let her cry, his own tears falling silently into her hair. "This is not fair," she said. "We are supposed to grow old together. We are supposed to have grandchildren and see Thomas take over the ranch and watch William become a great lawyer. This is not fair. I know, but we will make the most of the time we have." And they did. Warren worked as long as he was able, teaching Thomas everything he could about running the ranch. He spent time with William and Lucy and their families, getting to know his grandchildren and making memories. He sat with Ophelia on the porch every evening, and they talked about their life together, about all the good times and the hard times and everything in between. The pain got worse, and eventually Warren could not work anymore. He spent his days in a chair by the window, watching the ranch operations and giving advice when asked. Ophelia stayed by his side, reading to him and talking with him and holding his hand. One evening in late summer, with the sun setting over the desert in a blaze of orange and gold, Warren knew his time was almost up. He could feel it in his bones, the way everything was slowing down and growing distant. "Ophelia," he said softly. She was beside him immediately. "I am here. I need you to know something. These 24 years with you have been the best of my life. You made me happier than I ever thought possible. You gave me children and a home and a purpose. I love you more than words can say." Tears were streaming down her face. "I love you too. I have loved you from the moment you stopped for me at that depot. You saved my life that day, Warren. You saved mine too. I just did not know I needed saving until I saw you." He reached up with effort and cupped her face, wiping away her tears with his thumb. "Promise me you will keep living. Promise me you will watch our grandchildren grow and see Thomas make this ranch even better and enjoy every moment. Promise me you will not spend the rest of your life grieving. I promise, but I will never stop loving you. I do not want you to stop. Just do not let it keep you from living." William, Lucy, and Thomas came in then, gathering around his chair. Warren looked at each of them, his children, and felt overwhelming pride. They were good people. They would be all right. "Take care of your mother," he told them, "and take care of each other. Family is everything." "We will, Dad," William said, his voice breaking. Warren smiled. Then he closed his eyes and let go, drifting away on a tide of love and gratitude and peace. His last thought was of Ophelia's face that first day, trembling and terrified, and how right it had felt to take her home. Ophelia kept her promise. She grieved, deeply and truly, but she did not let it consume her. She continued teaching at the school and helping Thomas run the ranch. She watched her grandchildren grow and saw William become known as the finest lawyer in the territory. She saw Lucy have 4 children and Thomas marry a wonderful woman and eventually have children of his own. She lived to be 73 years old, active and sharp until the very end. She spent her last years writing down everything she remembered about her life with Warren, wanting their story preserved for their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She died peacefully in the same room where she had spent 24 years with Warren, surrounded by family. Her last words were, "I am coming home where I belong." They buried her next to Warren on the ranch, under a sky full of stars. The whole town came to the funeral because Ophelia Xavier had touched so many lives with her kindness and intelligence and dedication. Thomas stood at the gravesite, now a man of 47 running a ranch that had become one of the most successful in Nevada, and thought about his parents, about how they had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together, about how their love had shaped him and his siblings and the entire community of Paradise. The ranch continued for generations, passed down through the Xavier family. The story of Warren and Ophelia became legend in Paradise, the tale of the cowboy who stopped for a trembling woman at the depot and told her she was coming home where she belonged. It was a story about kindness and courage and the kind of love that changes lives. The old depot where it all started was eventually torn down and replaced with a more modern building. But before it was demolished, Thomas had a plaque made and mounted on the spot where Warren had found Ophelia. It read, Here on December 18, 1881, a cowboy stopped for a woman who needed help, and a love story began that would shape this town for generations. May we all be so kind to strangers, for we never know when we might be entertaining angels unaware. Paradise continued to grow and change over the decades and centuries, but the Xavier Ranch remained, a testament to what Warren and Ophelia had built together. And every generation that ran it knew the story of their great-great-grandparents, knew about the cold December day when everything changed because one man chose kindness over indifference. The love they shared did not end when they died. It lived on in their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. It lived on in the school that still stood in Paradise, now a historical landmark. It lived on in the stories people told about the early days of the town, when Nevada was still a territory and the West was still wild. It lived on because true love never really dies. It transforms and continues, echoing through time like music, like light, like hope. And somewhere in whatever comes after this life, Warren and Ophelia were together again, dancing under the stars, holding each other. Home at last, exactly where they belonged,